Okay, when we take a look at the idea of society being stratified, one of the things clearly we can look at is who benefits from stratification. So if society is divided up into layers, no matter what type of system you're looking at, of any of the types we already talked about, whether or not it's slavery or a caste system or a class system, we say who benefits the most from stratification? And the answer obviously is those people at the top, which we're just going to generally call the elite. So those people at the very top of society, we use the general term elite to describe them. They benefit the most, whether or not, again, you're looking at it from a Marxist or a Weberian point of view. From a Marxist point of view, they're the ones who own the means of production. If you're looking at it from a Weberian point of view, they're the ones with the most 3 Ps, the property, power, and prestige. But they're going to benefit the most from this stratification. And again, Marx predicted that there would be a violent overthrow of that. Weber not so much, but clearly recognized that those people at the top are the ones who benefit the most. And if you had to say what is the goal, especially from a conflict theory point of view, what is the goal of these various groups? Clearly one of the goals of the elite is to maintain their position in society. So if you're at the top, one of the things you are most concerned about is maintaining that position at the top of society to maintain the benefits that that position affords. So we can say that why aren't societies more equal? Why do we have this stratification? One of the things we can point at is that there is, in a lot of ways, efforts, overt efforts, conscious efforts made by the elites in a society to maintain a system of stratification and maintain themselves in the positions at the top. So some of the things we can look at is how is that accomplished? We can break it down into 2 basic ways, and we could say that the elites use both ideology, and we'll talk about that first, and secondarily we'll say force to maintain their position in society. Ideology is exactly that, ideas. It's the belief that society and stratification is justified in existing because that's the way things are. Simplest way of putting it is we say, why does society have all these layers, and why are some people at the top and other people in the middle at the bottom? And the ideology is that's just the way things are. We can take a look at a historical example. So if we think about societies throughout history, a lot of times this is very much tied to religion and the idea of divine power or an afterlife. And the phrase often used here is the term the divine right of kings. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean specifically and only kings. It could mean any type of a monarch. For example, if I were to ask you, if we were to go back in time to ancient Egypt, and you look around and realize that there's thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of slaves who are living very austere, poverty-stricken lives, and realize that there's a very few people at the very top, the priesthood and the pharaohs who are living these fabulous lives, and say, why is that? And let's say we were to ask Pharaoh, why are you in the position you are in? Clearly the answer would be, I am a god. I literally am either the product of or a living incarnation of a god. And for a society that has a very strong religious standpoint, that's a very powerful position to be in. If we take a look at, let's say, medieval England or medieval Europe, and we realize there's lots and lots and lots of peasants who are starving to death and sick and diseased, and we realize that there are kings living in castles and wearing gold and jewels and furs, and say to that king, why are you the king? The answer most commonly given is because God says so. And if we look at the relationship between religion and royalty, again, speaking specifically of medieval Europe, kings were appointed or at least condoned or blessed by the Pope. So the majority of people being extremely religious and having very strong ideas about God and an afterlife and the difference between heaven and hell, If you believe in a higher being and you believe that being has the ability to punish you by sending you to hell for defying him, in this case, male God, then, and a person now says, okay, God appointed me to this position, and you believe that, then to go against the king is to go against God, and will sentence you to an afterlife of pain and suffering. So this divine right of kings is a very important example, or a very strong example, of the ideology that is created by those in power to justify their own position. And again, are there still remnants of this today? We could certainly say that there's certainly arguments to be made that America is very much a very religious society. We could talk about the idea that we espouse notions like "in God we trust" and "God bless America," and in a lot of cases, those people who are considered sometimes to be saying unpopular speech, or especially speech which we consider to be un-American, we can also say to a certain degree are sometimes condemned religiously. So we know that these ideas of the divine right of kings definitely continue. Today, when we talk about in modern society much more of the ideology, we're much more likely to talk about the idea of a control or a flow of information. Information in our society, in a sense, has literally become a commodity unto itself. And when we look at the influence of mass media, we look at the influence of sometimes what we call hegemony, just culturally held beliefs which are passed on a lot of times through our cultural interactions or societal interactions with each other, we realize that there's a lot of messages in the things that we're exposed to on a regular basis, which really kind of let us know everything's just fine the way it is. And to question the reason that society is the way it is to somehow be, in a sense, kind of culturally disloyal, or in a lot of ways to be kind of going against the majority and setting yourself up for some type of reaction from the rest of society. So we sometimes say, okay, who are these elite in our society, the top 1%, the millionaires, billionaires, and we look at the ways that society regards them, and we realize that we're subjected to a lot of messages that basically kind of give us the impression that those people in those positions deserve to be where they are. In some ways they possess, like we said, superior qualities or traits that the rest of us don't possess, that they're in those positions because that's just the way it is and that's the way it should be. And then anybody who questions those ideas, to a certain degree, are going to be subject to, like we said, ridicule, perhaps even persecution by the rest of society who buys into this ideology. So the elites, and clearly, is that an accident? We can point to, and many researchers definitely have, pointed to this idea that ideology benefits those people in society and is supported and propagated by the people in society to protect their own position. In those instances where ideology fails, ultimately we could say that the elites absolutely have the ability to fall back on force. So another thing, let's go back to our medieval Europe example for a second. King in a castle, if the peasantry became too upset with their complete lack of access to food or the other necessities of life, and decided to rise up, what does the king have, or royalty, queen in a lot of cases, what does the king or queen or other nobility have at their disposal to keep the peasants from overthrowing them? Again, force, knights and castles and superior weapons to a large degree. Even if we look at, like I say, medieval Europe, it was a crime for the average peasant to own something like a sword or a knife. So the control of the population by maintaining superior force is a very powerful tool to maintaining stratification. Again, in modern society, we can kind of say, well, that's not likely to happen, but we definitely know that in instances in our own society where uprisings have occurred, that the elite have often used both police and military power to exert physical control over the population and put down what we might call uprisings or rebellions that would jeopardize their superior position in society.